My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 36 years old and I live with my husband Marcus in a quiet apartment just south of Denver. We never wanted much. No kids, no clutter, no drama. For the past 6 years, our life has been exactly that simple. I work in financial planning. Marcus is in design engineering. We live carefully, purposefully, without intrusion. But peace has a funny way of shattering all at once. It begins on a Thursday morning in January. The kind of morning where the snow outside hangs in the air like it's waiting to fall but doesn't. I'm standing in the kitchen, one hand wrapped around a ceramic mug, the other tucked into the sleeve of my robe. The apartment is still. I haven't spoken a word yet, not even to Marcus. My phone lights up on the counter. A voicemail. From Gavin. I press play and set it on speaker. Hey Rachel, it's Gavin. Sorry to leave this on voicemail, but I figured you'd want to know as soon as possible. His voice is even too even. I got a motion alert from the Greenridge property. Just after 7 this morning. Someone cut the gate chain and walked in. 2 of them, one's your brother-in-law. The other looked like his cousin, the one who helped pour concrete last fall. I already called the sheriff. They're heading up there now. My hand tightens around the mug. I don't flinch, don't curse, don't even blink. I just keep staring at the window where the frost is creeping inward across the glass, tracing a slow, white edge like it's trying to get in. Gavin continues. They used bolt cutters pushed through the rear entry door. Footage shows Don trying to mess with the camera in the living room, but he didn't get far. I saved all the clips and I'm emailing them now. Just wanted you to hear it from me first. I'll be at the cabin for the police walkthrough. Call me when you can. The message ends. The room doesn't move. Neither do I. A silence settles over everything, not peaceful, but dense, like something has folded over the morning and pressed the air down with it. I set the mug down slowly and turn toward the hallway. There's no rush in my movements, just a quiet precision, like I already knew this day was coming. My feet carry me to the home office. A room. Marcus and I don't use much anymore. I kneel beside the small cabinet in the corner and slide open the bottom drawer. It creaks faintly in protest. I reach past a row of old tax folders and pull out the thick envelope marked in black ink property records. Greenridge. It's heavier than I remember. I take it to the dining table and lay it flat. The window beside me frames the quiet street below, cars frosted over a thin sheen of snow drifting across the sidewalks. It's peaceful here. Sterile, far from the mountain roads that snake through Greenridge where the pines are tall and the silence feels earned. That house was supposed to be my escape. I close my eyes and breathe in slow and cold. My jaw hurts. I hadn't noticed how tightly I'd been clenching it. The folder waits. 3 years ago, after a weekend in the Rockies, I decided to buy something for myself. A quiet cabin, nothing extravagant. A-frame, dark wood, nestled behind a curve of pine trees just outside Greenridge proper. I paid in full cash from a bonus and savings, but to avoid family questions, I asked my parents to hold the title. It was supposed to be a formality. It wasn't. I unlatch the folder and slide out the documents, deed transfer instructions, maintenance receipts, photos of the original inspection, a spreadsheet of expenses, color-coded and time-stamped just the way I always kept them. It's all there. I flip the pages slowly, my fingers moving with care but no hesitation. I'm not shocked, not even really surprised. That's the part I didn't expect. Just 3 months ago during Thanksgiving, Don asked about the cabin. Saeed, it must be lonely to have a whole house go unused. I remember his tone now, casual but prodding. That wasn't a question. It was a test. Now I know what he was waiting for. I glance at the voicemail time on my phone, 9:42 a.m. That's when it all changed, not just because they broke in, but because the last illusion shattered, the illusion that I could keep one part of my life safe by keeping quiet. There's something about watching people cross a line so boldly that it pulls the floor out from under everything you thought was holding firm. The gate was chained, the locks were new, the title was protected, but none of that mattered. Because they didn't believe I'd do anything about it. They still thought of me as the quiet one, the one who wouldn't fight, the one who made smart decisions but never made a scene. They were wrong. Marcus walks in from the bedroom still groggy, his hair sticking up at one side. He pauses in the doorway when he sees me at the table. "What's going on?" I turn my head slowly and meet his eyes. "They broke in." His expression sharpens. He doesn't need to ask who. He walks over, sets his hand on my shoulder. I place mine on top of his just for a moment. Then I open the folder fully. Property records. Greenridge. It reads across the top page, bold and clean. I start reading. The snow finally begins to fall outside, and the silence for once feels like a decision. The folder stays open on the table long after the snow outside thickens. I don't turn the pages. I don't need to. Not yet. I know what's in there, what's always been in there. Instead, my mind drifts backward to the day it all started to come undone. Not the break-in, not the voicemail. No, the real beginning happened quietly. A backyard, a barbecue, laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. It was 6 weeks ago. My mother had called early on a Wednesday morning, her voice light but laced with something sharper. "Rachel, we're doing a family cookout this Saturday. Everyone's coming. You should too." I hesitated, I always did. These things drained me, but she knew that, which is why she called when she knew I'd be too polite to say no outright. "You know how your sisters are? Brooke's been exhausted Melanie too. It would mean a lot to your father." She didn't say it would mean a lot to her, just that it would mean something to everyone else. I agreed. Marcus had glanced up from his book when I told him. "We don't have to go," he said gently. I know I'd replied, but I was already planning our arrival, our early exit, our smiles that would last just long enough. That Saturday, the air was heavy with July heat. We pulled up to my parents' house, a low beige colonial with too many flower pots and not enough shade. The driveway was full. Inside, I could hear the sharp rise and fall of voices, a dog barking music clashing with squealing kids. I wanted to stay in the car. Instead, I stepped out, smoothed my dress, and followed Marcus through the gate into the backyard. It was chaos. Brooke was already holding court under the patio umbrella, her sunglasses perched high on her head like a crown. Melanie leaned against the grill drink in hand, laughing too loudly at something one of the men said. Children ran in screaming arcs around folding chairs and paper plates. Someone had already spilled soda on the walkway. The smell of charred meat floated thick through the air. "Oh, look who decided to join us!" Melanie's voice rang out. She sauntered over her tone, sharp and sweet at once. Miss Independent herself. I gave a polite smile. "I wasn't sure you'd make it," Brooke added, approaching with a cold drink that she didn't offer busy closing deals, or jetting off to some glacier in Iceland again. "No trips this month," I said lightly. Marcus squeezed my hand. "Right," Melanie said, "because when you don't have kids, every month's a vacation." The words stung, but not because they were new. They never were. These lines had been rehearsed for years. I had heard them when I bought my first car outright, when I took a promotion that came with international travel, when I didn't come home for Thanksgiving because I was climbing in the Sierras. They always masked envy with judgment. I stayed quiet. That was my role. The quiet one. The one with a job no one understood, but everyone commented on, the one who was never asked for help, but always expected to offer it. "Where's Mom?" I asked. "In the kitchen," Brooke said, already turning away. "She's been up since 5 prepping. You know how she is. Can't relax unless everything's perfect." The implication lingered, that I never helped, that I always arrived late to a meal already cooked. I made my way to the cooler near the back steps, grabbed a water bottle, and found a seat beside Marcus at the edge of the yard. We sat in silence, our faces half in the shade, listening to the fragments of conversation that floated around us. Politics, sports, who got into what college. Then screaming. 3 of the kids barreled toward the patio, chasing one another with muddy feet and popsicle-stained hands. One of them, a boy I vaguely recognized as Melanie's youngest, made a sharp turn and ran directly at an older guest standing near the pool's edge. "Push her in," he yelled. There was a lunge, a flailing of arms, and the woman stumbled, half falling into the water. She pulled herself out, soaked her face, set in stunned disbelief. Everyone went silent for a moment, then came the laughter, uneasy, tight. No apologies. Before I could move, the kids turned again, and this time they were running toward me. I stepped aside. They flew past, missed their target, and toppled over the edge into the shallow end with a splash. Marcus stifled a laugh. Someone chuckled behind us. Then Melanie's voice rose sharp and shrill. "Rachel, why didn't you catch them? They could have been hurt." I turned. "They were running full speed," I said, keeping my voice low. "So you just let them fall?" Brooke added, rushing over her sandals, slapping against the patio. "They're children. Rachel, you could have done something." "They're not mine," I said quietly. And I knew as soon as the words left my mouth that they hated that sentence, not because it was wrong, but because it was true. I watched their faces change, hurt shifting into offense, the kind that comes not from injury, but from exposure. Marcus stood then. We left 15 minutes later. The drive home was quiet. I stared out the window as Denver's skyline began to rise in the distance. In the reflection, I saw myself the same composed face I wore in every family photo, every holiday card, every group text. Present but never known. Valued but never understood. At home, I changed into jeans and opened my laptop. I didn't check emails. I pulled up a folder on my desktop labeled Greenridge. Inside were the scanned purchase documents for the cabin. A modest home, but beautiful set just beyond the tree line on the northern slope. I'd bought it in full, titled it under my parents' name, to keep the peace. I had convinced myself that doing so was wise, that I didn't need credit for things I could afford. But that folder had been growing heavier. With every visit someone else made, with every time I was told to share what they never contributed to, the silence that used to protect me was now being used against me. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe peace without boundaries isn't really peace at all. It happened on a Tuesday. I was at my desk finishing quarterly planning reports when my phone buzzed with a message from Camille, a colleague I'd met during a real estate conference 2 years prior. We didn't talk often, but we followed each other on social media and shared the occasional vacation tip or article. "Hey Rachel," the message read, "thought of you when I saw this. Isn't this your cabin?" Attached was a screenshot. It was unmistakable. My Greenridge cabin angled just enough to catch the slope of the pine trees and the stone fire pit I had installed myself. The caption was chirpy and casual. "Hidden gem for a mountain weekend. Loved the cozy vibe." Host Melanie Monroe was amazing. A hashtag underneath read, "Nair Weekend Retreat." I blinked. For a long moment I stared at the screen, not quite breathing. Then I opened my laptop, typed in Airbnb, and searched. It took less than 30 seconds. There it was. Tranquil A-frame escape, hosted by Melanie. Dozens of reviews. High-res photos I hadn't taken. The living room was staged with warm blankets and wine glasses. Melanie's style, not mine. The host photo was a cropped image of my sister smiling behind sunglasses. The listing showed full availability on most weekends, with rates ranging from $350 to $450 per night, depending on the season. Some guests had left paragraphs of glowing praise. Others complimented the thoughtful welcome basket or Melanie's restaurant suggestions. I scrolled. One review mentioned a guest's car getting stuck during a snowstorm. Melanie responded within minutes and sent someone to help. I sat back. She'd hired someone for a place she didn't own, without ever asking. I didn't feel anger right away. Not yet. What I felt was a steady, draining sensation, like blood slowly leaving the body, a numbness followed by cold clarity. I took a screenshot. Then another. I opened a spreadsheet and created a new folder on my desktop. Unauthorized rentals. Cabin. I logged each review, date, rate, reviewer name, booking length. I matched it against seasonal tax records and my own utility bills. Sure enough, heating spikes aligned with her busiest weekends. I reached out to Camille. "Would you do me a huge favor," I asked, "book one night at this place and tell me what happens?" She agreed without hesitation. 3 days later, Camille texted me a copy of her booking confirmation and a cheerful message from Melanie with check-in instructions and a lockbox code. No one had spoken to me. No one had asked. Melanie had just taken it. That weekend, Camille drove up and stayed the night. When she came back, she sent me photos. The porch was decorated with autumn garlands. A handwritten welcome note rested on the kitchen counter. "So glad to have you. Please enjoy some wine on us. Melanie." I stared at the handwriting. It was hers, the same bubbly cursive she used in high school yearbooks. Something clicked. This wasn't casual. This wasn't occasional. This was a business. And it wasn't just Melanie. A week later, Marcus and I drove up to the cabin unannounced to check the heating system before the first big freeze. As we pulled into the gravel path, I noticed a strange SUV parked near the edge. On the porch, a man and woman I didn't recognize were setting up a small grill. The man turned when he saw us and smiled politely. "You must be friends of Brooke's," he said. "She told us to come today. Said her family's meeting us later." "Brooke." I smiled thinly. "Just passing through," I replied. We didn't stay long. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't yell. I just walked through the rooms after they left and noted the changes new throws on the couch, a Bluetooth speaker on the mantelboard games I hadn't bought, my space rearranged like a hotel lobby. Back home, I added a second tab to the spreadsheet Brooke, guest use. I logged the vehicle's plate number and estimated dates. The deeper I went, the further the silence stretched. My parents had always told me it was better this way, having the cabin under their names. It kept things clean. They said fewer questions, less attention. But now I saw what it really did. It gave Melanie and Brooke permission. Not directly, not in words, but in that way families do where nothing is said aloud but everything is implied. The cabin wasn't mine, not officially. It was theirs to share, to enjoy, to distribute as needed. And I was just the reliable one, the funding source, the background. The more I uncovered, the less shocked I became. I thought back to every time I'd paid quietly covering Dad's overdue medical bill wiring money to help Melanie bridge a gap during a rough month paying for Brooke's oldest to attend a robotics camp. I never asked for repayment. I didn't want to be the bitter one, the one keeping score. But this was a contract. Unspoken, unwritten, but binding nonetheless. I give. They take, I stay quiet. They assume I'll always do so. Until now. That evening, Marcus sat beside me watching me scroll through yet another guest photo. This one of a couple eating dinner on the deck. I built myself. "Do you want me to say something?" he asked. "To your parents?" "To her." "No," I said. He didn't ask why. I didn't need to say it out loud. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't poor communication. It was a pattern. And now finally I was ready to break it. It was Thursday when my mother called. "Just us adults," she said quickly, like she already sensed resistance. "No kids, just a calm, honest conversation. Please, Rachel, it'll help everyone." I agreed. Not for them, but because I needed to look each of them in the eye. We arrived just before 6. The living room looked like it had been cleaned in a hurry. The couch cushions were freshly fluffed, and the smell of cinnamon-scented spray still hung in the air. A tray of untouched cookies sat on the coffee table beside 6 glasses of water symmetry masking tension. Melanie and Brooke were already seated. Their husbands, Don and Greg, sat stiffly at their sides. My mother paced near the fireplace, pretending to adjust the mantel decor. My father stood by the window, arms folded silent. Marcus and I entered without ceremony. I didn't greet anyone. I sat down and placed the manila envelope on the glass table in front of me. The air shifted. I brought everything I said, my voice even, since this is a conversation about the truth. My mother looked up sharply. "Rachel, this isn't an attack." "Then you won't mind what I'm about to show." I opened the envelope and pulled out a folder. Inside were transaction logs, contractor invoices, and a scanned copy of the title deed. I slid it across the table. "I bought the Breen Ridge cabin 3 years ago, paid in full, every tax, every repair, every snowplow and waterline inspection. The title is under your names. I looked at my parents because I thought it would keep the peace, but make no mistake, it was always mine." Melanie's mouth twitched into a half smile. "I didn't know you were so upset," she said lightly. "It was just supposed to help with tuition. That place just sits there most of the time." Then ask, I said, or better yet, don't list it under your name like you own it. Brooke leaned forward. I never charged money, she said quickly. Just let friends borrow it a couple times. I didn't make a dime. That doesn't make it better, Marcus said softly beside me. Dawn scoffed. Look, this feels like a lot of drama over a vacation cabin. If Rachel's name's not on the title, maybe it's not as clear-cut as she thinks. I pulled out another sheet. Not true. Here's the affidavit filed with my attorney, along with an email thread confirming every payment came from my personal accounts. And here's a notarized statement from the contractor listing me as sole project contact. The legal chain is traceable. Silence settled over the room. My mother finally stepped forward. But you never told us you felt this strongly. It's just, you live comfortably. No kids, and Melanie's been struggling. I stared at her. You're saying, because I made good choices, I owe the consequences of yours. No, she said, retreating slightly. We just thought it made more sense. You're hardly up there. And Melanie... I don't owe anyone here anything I said. Melanie bristled. You don't even understand what it's like. You chose not to have kids. You don't carry that kind of weight. Some of us don't have the luxury of silence and spreadsheets. Brooke nodded slightly. We thought you'd share because that's what family does. No, I said, my voice lower now. What family does is respect boundaries. Ask before taking. Tell the truth instead of twisting it. Don shifted in his seat. Feels like you're trying to punish everyone because you're bitter or bored. Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. She's not bitter, she's just not being taken for granted anymore. I looked toward my father. Say something. He met my eyes slow and steady. It's true. He said finally, Rachel paid for it. All of it. We held the title to keep things simple. She asked us to. My mother turned to him, startled Ron. I'm tired, he said simply, and I'm not lying for anyone anymore. The room stiffened again. So what now? Brooke asked, folding her arms. You want us to pay rent. Give back the money. What? No, I said. You don't use it at all. From today forward, no one touches the cabin, not without my permission, and if it happens again, I'll press charges. You'd really do that? Melanie asked, her voice rising. To your own family. Yes, I said, to anyone who disrespects me. My mother's voice cracked. Rachel, please. We've been a family too long to tear it all apart like this. No, Mom, I said. You've just gotten too used to me never saying no. I picked up the envelope and stood. Marcus followed. At the doorway, I paused. I love you, Mom, I said without turning around, but I'm done playing the fool. We walked out into the night. The alert came just after 8. We were sitting at a long table inside a friend's condo mid-conversation when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I ignored it at first, then came the second vibration, and a third. Marcus glanced at me. I reached for the phone and opened the notification. Motion detected Greenridge property driveway camera, 8:07 p.m. Then another. Motion detected rear door. My stomach dropped. I opened the app and hit play on the most recent clip. The image loaded slowly. The screen showed the cabin's front gate cast in low light. Then movement, 2 men approaching. One held a flashlight, the other a set of bolt cutters. I watched the metal chain snap like thread. They slipped inside. Marcus leaned over, saw my expression, and whispered, What is it? I didn't answer. I was already standing. We excused ourselves quietly from the table. No explanations, just coats, car keys, nods of apology. In the elevator, I played the next clip this time from the back camera. The same 2 figures approaching the kitchen door. The taller one, Don jammed a tool beneath the latch, pushed hard, and the door cracked inward. His cousin followed. The final frame caught Don turning toward the camera and reaching up trying to block the lens with his hand. I pressed pause. We got in the car. Marcus drove. I sat silently, phone resting in my lap. Neither of us spoke. The snow had started again, just enough to soften the edges of the world outside the windshield. Inside, the air felt sharp. When the phone rang, I answered immediately. Rachel, it's Gavin, he said. Breath quick. I just got the same alerts. I'm up here now. They forced the gate and the back door. I called the sheriff officers, are 10 minutes out. Did they take anything I asked? Not sure, but I saw Don try to cover the living room camera. His cousin kicked at the side panel near the thermostat. It looked planned. I closed my eyes for a beat. Thank you for acting fast. Of course I'll call again when the officers are done. I hung up and stared straight ahead. The dashboard light turned my skin pale blue. My hands had gone cold, but I didn't notice until Marcus placed his over mine. Say something, he said gently. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. It wasn't just the break-in, it was what it meant, the message underneath the act. They didn't believe I'd do anything. They had ignored the last conversation, the documentation, the clear boundaries I'd laid down. And now they were cutting chains. The rest of the drive passed in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake beside Marcus, eyes fixed on the ceiling while the footage played again in my mind, frame by frame. The bolt cutters, the door cracking. Don's face turned toward the camera like he knew he'd be seen and didn't care. In the morning, Gavin called again. They were arrested, he said. Caught inside trying to disconnect the router. The cops found tools in the car. Don told them they were retrieving family belongings. The other one, his cousin, didn't say anything. I listened without interrupting. They've been charged. Gavin continued unlawful entry property damage and attempted disabling of a security system. Good, I said. I've got copies of the incident report. I'll email them now. When I hung up, I stood at the kitchen counter for a long time. The house was silent. The coffee maker hadn't even been turned on. I didn't move until the phone rang again. It was my mother. I knew it before I answered. Rachel, she began, her voice already trembling. I heard what happened. The boys, Don and his cousin, they didn't mean to hurt anything. They got carried away. Carried away, I repeated slowly. They thought it was still family property, she continued. They didn't know you'd go this far. This far, I said, you mean involving the law. They have jobs. Honeydon works in logistics if he gets a record. I closed my eyes, Mom. She paused. You're asking me to erase a felony to keep peace. There was a long silence on the line. I just want this to be over, she said quietly. We're family. No, I said, we're people who share a last name, and they broke into my house. They used tools, they planned it. They looked directly at a camera and still didn't care. They're scared. So am I said. But I'm not scared of them. I'm scared of how far people will go when they think someone like me won't fight back. I didn't raise you to hate your family. I looked out the window. No, I said. You raised me to keep the peace, but peace isn't silence. Peace isn't giving up your safety, so other people don't feel bad about their choices. She didn't respond. I ended the call. Then I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened my email. To Charlotte Green, subject legal representation. Charlotte, please represent me in all legal communication going forward. I'm ready to press charges. Best, Rachel Monroe. The next morning, I met Gavin at the cabin. It was colder than usual for early March, the kind of cold that cuts through coat linings and sits on your chest. He was already waiting when I pulled in hands in his jacket pockets, standing next to a plastic storage bin labeled Upgrades, Breen Ridge. We didn't waste time. I signed the new contract standing against the porch rail. Full service management monthly updates camera and lock upgrades and written authority to refuse access to anyone on a restricted list. Gavin nodded without fanfare, took the signed forms, and immediately set to work. By afternoon, new signage was posted along the driveway, private property security monitoring in effect. 2 new cameras were installed, one above the chimney line and one angled at the utility path behind the house. A 3rd camera inside the cabin was replaced with a model that backed up footage automatically to encrypted cloud storage. He handed me the new key fob himself. This one scrambles every 72 hours, he said, no copies. I took it. The plastic felt heavier than it should have, like ownership pressed into my hand in physical form. By evening, I had returned to Denver. I opened my inbox to find the first wave. The subject lines varied, but the tone didn't. One email from Melanie simply read, "You really want to destroy our whole family over a house." Another from Brooke, "You've always thought you were better than us. Now you're proving it." Even Dawn had sent one just 4 words, "This is on you." I read them all. Each word confirmed what I already knew, that none of them had learned anything. They weren't sorry for what they did, only sorry they couldn't control the outcome. I replied to none. Instead, I created a new folder titled Family Contact, Do Not Respond, and saved every message I forwarded, each one to Charlotte, my attorney, with dates and sender addresses. Her brief reply came later that night. This confirms a pattern, she wrote. We'll document it all. The next day, I blocked every number unsubscribed from every family thread and locked down every social account. For the first time in years, my phone went quiet. Even then, they found other ways. Handwritten letters started arriving, first from my mother. Her handwriting was the same, rounded and careful, like someone still trying to be gentle even as she said hard things. Rachel, she wrote, I know you're hurt. I know you feel betrayed. But think of the children. They don't deserve to be caught in the middle. Melanie was just trying to survive. Dawn made a mistake. We all did. Don't carry this to court. Don't ruin their lives. There was no apology, just fear. Then Melanie sent one. The ink was darker, the strokes sharper. If you can't help with tuition, she wrote, at least don't destroy our ability to live. You're turning your back on your own blood over what a place you barely visit. I folded the letter. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it out. I placed it in the file drawer alongside the rest. That drawer now had a label. Family records do not open. Charlotte had begun preparing the formal settlement draft. Damages costs, restricted access, and a no-contact clause. She handled it all. I trusted her entirely. I didn't need updates. Instead, I began writing again. It started as scribbles on the back of receipts, then phrases in the margins of old notebooks. Finally, I bought a new journal, plain black unlined pages. I wrote about silence, about betrayal, about what happens when the person everyone leans on decides to stop carrying the weight. Some entries were 2 lines long. Others spilled across pages like something I'd been holding for years. Marcus noticed the change before I did. He brought home a second desk lamp, rearranged the reading nook by the window, made sure I had tea before bed, but didn't ask questions. That was his way. Steady present, never pushing. I don't know when it happened exactly, but sometime in the weeks that followed, I stopped flinching when the phone buzzed. I stopped watching the front door expecting another letter. The cabin remained untouched. Gavin sent photo updates once a week. Snow piled softly on the deck, a fox passing through the tree line, a fresh bag of salt by the side entrance. He kept the tone simple, professional. I liked that. No apologies, no commentary. Just truth. One afternoon, I sat down in the office and opened a fresh document. Title: Boundaries are not betrayal. Subtitle: What families don't teach you about saying no. I didn't know if I'd finish it or share it, but the act of writing felt like reclaiming something. That night, as I was locking up, I found one more envelope on the counter. It had arrived with the day's mail unmarked except for my name. Inside was a letter. Melanie again. It was different this time, slower, less angry. I've hated you for a long time, she wrote. Not because you hurt me, but because you didn't need us. You made a life we couldn't touch. I thought if I borrowed pieces of it, I'd feel what you feel, but I never did. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg. She just explained. I folded the letter carefully and walked to the file drawer. I opened it, slipped the page inside, and closed it again. Then I locked it. The envelope arrived on a Monday morning. It was hand-delivered to the receptionist's desk at my office. No return address. Just my name written in block letters across the front. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Dawn's stiff, careful, like someone trying too hard to appear calm. I opened it without ceremony. Inside was a single-page note and a folded check for $5,000. The note read like it had been rewritten several times. Rachel, we want to make this right. What happened wasn't okay, and we regret how far it went. Please don't move forward with legal action. This is to show we're serious. We won't come back to the property. We'll sign anything you need. Dawn and Travis. There was no mention of the lock, no acknowledgement of the footage, just vague regret and a plea. I stared at the check for a long time. $5,000 didn't fix anything, but it proved something. They were scared, Not of me, but of consequence. For the first time, they understood that I wasn't going to back down. I slipped the envelope into my bag and drove straight to Charlotte's office. Her assistant waved me in without waiting. Charlotte didn't look surprised when I laid the letter and check on her desk. She read it once, then leaned back. "They're not apologizing," she said flatly. "They're calculating. This isn't remorse, it's strategy." "I know," I said. She tapped the corner of the envelope. "We could take this to court, but you'd be looking at a year of depositions, filings, hearings delays. You might get more, you might get nothing." I nodded slowly. "What about a settlement?" Charlotte straightened. "A civil agreement. We control the terms. No trial, no press, no circus. But enforceable. You break it. We reopen everything." "Let's do it." That afternoon, Charlotte drafted the settlement it included. Full reimbursement for property damage. An additional $25,000 for emotional distress and time lost. Complete coverage of legal fees. A binding no-contact clause. A clause stating that any breach would reopen the criminal case immediately. No forgiveness was requested, none was offered. 2 days later, Dawn and Travis arrived at Charlotte's office with their attorney. I didn't attend. Charlotte said I didn't need to. She'd handle it. Afterward, she called with the summary. They looked nervous. She said Travis didn't speak at all. Dawn tried to negotiate the emotional damages line. I waited. So I pulled out the footage. She continued the bolt cutters, the door, the text messages, the part where he flipped off your camera. And I asked. He went quiet. They signed the documents. 2 checks were issued, one for the settlement amount, the other for Charlotte's legal retainer. No handshake, no thank you. Later that evening, Charlotte sent me a copy of the signed agreement and a receipt log. The subject line of the email read, "Finalized." I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. What I felt was the slow settling of weight from my chest into the ground beneath me, like something had shifted from my shoulders to the soil and I was finally allowed to breathe. When I got home, Marcus was already in the kitchen. He didn't say anything, just reached up to the cupboard, pulled down a bottle of wine we'd been saving, and opened it. I leaned against the counter as he poured 2 glasses. He handed one to me. I took it, paused, then raised it toward him. "Not quite the end," I said, "but the chapter is closed." We clinked glasses. Outside, the wind was picking up again, but inside the house, everything was still. We took the road south. No destination, just a stretch of map. We'd always said we'd drive Colorado into New Mexico through stretches of desert where cell towers fade and the silence isn't absence but atmosphere. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my leg. The windows stayed cracked just enough to let in the dry air. It smelled like dust and sun and something ancient. We didn't talk much. There wasn't anything urgent to say. The quiet between us had changed. It wasn't full of weight anymore. It was light shared, understood. I kept a notebook in my lap. Not the one with court timelines or evidence logs. This one was new. The first pages were loose thoughts, lines about rebuilding boundaries, choosing stillness, the difference between peace and appeasement. Then full paragraphs started to form. The beginning of something. I titled one draft, "The Cost of Being the Quiet One." Another, "When Family Isn't Safe." I didn't know if I'd publish any of it, but the writing came easily now. Not out of anger, but from the place that once held silence. And I realized that place was never empty. It had only been waiting. When we returned to Denver, the house felt different. Not cleaner, not quieter. Just aligned. There were no unopened letters stacked by the door. No texts waiting to be ignored. The space finally matched the life I'd been building for years. I kept the cabin, of course. Gavin sent regular reports photos of the back porch, updates on weatherproofing alerts when wildlife passed too close to the fence line. The place was secure, fully protected, but I hadn't been back since the night Dawn cut the gate. Not out of fear, just disinterest. The cabin had once been sacred, a retreat. Now it was just property, a well-kept one, a reminder of what I'd endured, what I'd reclaimed, and what I chose to leave behind. The sanctuary was no longer tied to a physical place. It was mine now wherever I chose to live it. My mother still called sometimes. Never long conversations, just brief check-ins. She talked about the garden, her new almond cake recipe, the neighbor's cat that kept sleeping in the flower beds. She didn't bring up Melanie or Dawn, or the cabin. That part of our relationship had gone dark like a hallway we both agreed not to enter anymore. And that was fine. Peace didn't mean we had to agree. It meant I no longer needed her permission to set the boundary. Then one afternoon, a padded envelope arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Melanie. I carried it inside and laid it on the table. For 3 days it stayed there. I passed it every morning, saw it when I poured coffee, felt its weight even without touching it. On the 4th night I opened it. Inside was a folded letter. Not angry, not defensive. Just a long string of words that read like a confession she hadn't known how to give in person. She wrote about growing up in the same house but living in a different version of it, about watching me leave succeed, stand on my own, and feeling something she didn't know how to name until later. Envy. Yes, but more than that, grief. I thought I'd feel powerful if I borrowed what you built, she wrote, but it didn't make me stronger. It just reminded me how far I was from living my own life. There were no asks, no offers to repair things. Only the line, "I finally see what I cost you." I folded the letter and carried it to the bedroom. The nightstand drawer opened with a soft creak. I placed the letter inside and closed it. Then I locked it. That was enough. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't demand acknowledgement or apology. It just exists in the choices you make once you know what you're worth. I chose quiet. I chose distance. I chose to protect myself the way no one else ever had. Some weekends, Marcus and I drove without a map, just long highways and old diners, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and drip coffee that tasted like memory. I started sleeping through the night again, waking up without dread, smiling without effort. The silence I had carried for years finally had space to breathe. One morning, as the sun pushed through the window, I sat by the table, opened my journal, and wrote the line I hadn't been able to say out loud until now. I forgive them, but I don't want them back. Forgiveness isn't always an invitation. Sometimes it's just the door you close behind you before walking away. I still have the key to the cabin. It sits in a small bowl by the front door, not hidden, not guarded, just there. Sometimes I glance at it, but I don't reach for it. The peace I needed no longer lives there. It lives here, with me. In the way I no longer explain my choices, in the way Marcus never asks me to, in the way I've stopped writing for permission and started writing to remember. I'm still the youngest, but I no longer live like I owe them my silence. And that finally feels like freedom. Rachel's story is a reminder that not all battles are loud and not all strength is visible. Sometimes the deepest courage comes from drawing a line no one else can see and refusing to let it be crossed again. She didn't seek revenge. She chose clarity. She didn't demand apologies. She demanded space. In a world where silence is often mistaken for weakness, Rachel proved that stillness can hold more power than any scream. Her journey wasn't about breaking ties. It was about breaking patterns. And in doing so, she reclaimed something no one else could offer her peace on her own terms. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on the boundaries you've drawn or the ones you still need to. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like, follow, and stay connected for more stories about finding strength where others least expect it.